Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tropic Trade Group, and this is an end of day recap. Streaming this live this week. I just want to see what you guys think about this live, and I appreciate any of the feedback that you guys have regarding that. But just a little bit easier too for me to send out videos this way too. So I don't mind doing these live after hours. At least I'll try it out for a bit. So. Let me just bring up that risk disclaimer. Risk disclaimer. Please read the full risk disclaimer right here. But everything that I'm talking about in today's video is for education purposes only. So, couple events that we had today. We heard about a China trade deal. I don't, I'm not a trade expert, so I'm really not going to go into that other than maybe it lifts a little bit of uncertainty out of the market. I don't know if it's a good trade deal with China or not. To me, I don't know. A lot of this is kind of noise. We also had the CPI report that came in a tick lower than expectations. Initial reaction was very strong. IWM gapped up 1.5% pre-market, but basically just kind of dribbled all day long lower. All three of the indices, S&P, Qs, and IWM, and really the biggest move from high to low was IWM. So I'm going to go over those charts. I'm going to try to tell you if that's a warning signal, if anything really changes. Finally saw the VIX kind of perk up a bit today, but while it seemed like dramatic if you're looking at 5-minute bars, I mean the VIX is still where did we close today in the VIX? Still, in the 17 handle. It did reach up to 18 right before the about sometime in the last hour of trading, but kind of cooled back down. So again, you're dealing with it's very different when the VIX spikes from like a 16 to 17 or 16 to 18 versus a 23 to 25, right? I mean, it's a different thing. It's still when you're below 20 in the VIX, it's still to me all considered kind of low volatility. So so a couple of things, I'll come back to what were the output, I'll talk about some of the outperformers and some of the single stocks, but I want to review the indices first, and I'll just kind of give you my interpretation of that. So I'm going to start with SPY. I've got to just stop the screen share here for a minute because I've got a complicated system always over here. So I'm sharing like different windows. So let's bring it back in the charts here. And then I got to share. And then I got to hit this. So SPY, so my interpretation, maybe a little bit of just upside exhaustion. We've just been gliding higher here. And, I mentioned that price could get hung up around this VPOC a little bit. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes we kind of go a little bit higher, then we come back in. Why is this blue line important? Oh, it's because where there's a lot of volume that's previously occurred. So sometimes we kind of just hang around this level. Is there any type of sell signal here? I don't think so. Again, my interpretation, we're still above the 5-period moving average, right? The moving averages, I use them quite a bit when you have a pullback, when a single name is in an uptrend and a defined uptrend, and it pulls back to, let's say, the 20-day moving average. Those are usually great spots to see if buyers return. I also kind of rely on them a little bit too once we're trading above or below the value area for the month, right? So we're breaking out. We've been breaking out of last month's range, right? And that's the price above the value area. So once we do that, there's not much. I mean, I can kind of look at extensions away from the value area, but usually what I rely on is something like a 5-period moving average because it just tells me what the short-term trend is doing. And we could sometimes you could have the ugliest looking candle in the world, but if we don't break trend, then there's nothing really that changes. So this is the daily chart, of course. So price did bounce off that 5-period moving average and is still above. I also tend to look at the 1-hour chart just to see if anything has changed here. Take a look. We started the week basically here. We kind of rallied a little bit out of that. Here's again this 1-hour chart that was around the CPI number, but we're just kind of checking back here. So it was not a particularly great price action type day, and I'll go over that like with the Qs in just a second. But 600 spot 24, like that's also the level to watch. So we we tested that a couple times. We tested that in the overnight session before of that, and also we tested this today. So really that's the level that I'm watching in the short term. Again, if you're a longer term trader, you don't necessarily have to pay attention to this, but 600 spot 24 is the level that I'm watching. Let's do the same exercise, and I'll try to do it a little bit quicker here for the Qs, but same thing, right? We've been gliding up here above the 5 period moving average. We did not break below the 5 period moving average, and the 5 period moving average, by the way, is still sloping up right now. 1 hour chart, we also came in and tested this 531.77 is the level to watch. So, we're hanging on there by basically a hair right now. But it's so far it's a check back, and I'm not going to guess if we're going to have downside action. If you're looking to short, I would watch to see if we break below 531.77. Right now, this is just a check back to a breakout area. And I just wanted to mention this too. This is kind of how the day was going. Here was the high of the day at 8:30. We try to rally back here around like 11 o'clock, and not to say like we needed to take out the highs, but we did make a lower high. We made a lower high here, we made a lower high here, we made another lower high here, and then really the volatility kind of picked up here right around the going into the 2 o'clock hour. But again, we bounced again. Notice that we went all the way down to the top of the value area, bottom of the value area, held nice candle to mark the lows of the day, rallied back, but could not break. And I had said this in the trading room. I'm like, hey, we're bouncing here, but it's going to be tough considering like we've been making lower highs all day today for this to kind of break back higher. And that was a great little point there. But like I said, we didn't really want to break lower either. So that's where we are. So again, one day is not a trend, but today was all about just lower highs throughout the trading session. And again, that's important. It's important to kind of in any type of trend to basically look at. And then I just wanted to cover IWM too. A couple of things going on here in IWM, which has been a really nice performer the last, 2 weeks, I think. But we ran into some overhead resistance, right? This looks much different than the S&P and the Qs, because this is not trending and above the value area. It's not out of the value area for the year. It's still inside value, and it got clipped here by the 200-day moving average. It ran into that a little bit yesterday too. So there's some there's a tough little test here that's happening for the IWM. Also, I noted this pre-market that I actually mentioned this yesterday on Twitter, that I was like, hey, watch this upside VPOC, right? So here's a good example of like sometimes just the overhead supply is too much. And here it was. We took this out, tried to go higher and failed, and just ended up going lower for the whole session. IWM is, what can I say? IWM is tricky like that. It's made, like I said, it's made an impressive move, but I think it's important to know like where your resistance is. So that's the indices. And I think, ultimately, I think some of the bigger names are dragging down the indices for a little bit. And Apple's a good example of that. Apple had a developers conference that really didn't kind of give us anything. And just as I was going through like lower highs for the day, you could use these principles in any time frame. But same thing, I've talked about Apple a couple times. I don't trade Apple much, but it's just really good for pattern recognition. Since the end of last year, it's been making lower highs the whole way, right? So I mean, I know that people like to buy the dip in things, but I would, whether it's Apple or a high flyer momentum name, it's got to get out of the pattern. Like you could do all the dip buying that you want, but if nothing is changing in the technical picture, right, you're just spinning wheels. And you could hope all you want, but you don't have anything until the pattern changes. And it's certainly a change for a number of stocks that were doing this for a while, but you need a catalyst, right? And Microsoft is a good example of that. So again, like I just want to make sure that you're seeing this just lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, right? So again, you can hope and pray all you want that something's going to change here, but really you need confirmation, and you need confirmation that buyers are stepping back in. And what would tell me at least that that would begin to happen, right, is for this to at least begin to get above some of those, um, previous areas where it's continued to go lower. But just to kind of give an example, like I was talking about this name earlier, notice what happened in Microsoft. Microsoft for a while was pretty stagnant, right? Made a high, same thing in the end of 2024, lower high, lower high, lower high. What changed this around for Microsoft? Earnings, right? So that was the catalyst, and earnings can do that. Earnings can completely change around the personality of a name, and Microsoft has, out of this group, out of the Mag 7 or Great 8, as I call them, has probably been the best performer, other than Netflix. Which brings me to Netflix. I talked about so let's go over this one first. I know it wasn't the most exciting mover of the day, but it doesn't matter. Like, there's this thing that's kind of going around where folks have to be in the most exciting names. A trade setup is a trade setup. You're going to hear me talk a lot about this in this video, but here's the, nice, rally, of course. Here's your check back to the 20-day moving average, also to the top of the value area for the month. And I bought this, right around the lows yesterday. I talked about this in yesterday's video, and it worked quite well considering I grabbed this, I think around like 1185 yesterday. And, stock traded up nicely. So, and again, this is one I like to personally. I don't like to have all types of names like Oklo and SMR in my, in my account. So I'm going to cover those names in just a second because it's too hard to manage. Like if you're only trading one or two names, it's fine. But I'm also managing a trading room too, so I can't have 6 or 7 names that are really, really high momentum on. I like to have something like this. Also, what worked pretty well is another name, and I believe I talked about this in yesterday's video. I apologize if I didn't, but look at the same type of setup here. You got to be a little bit patient with this one. Broadcom has been acting very well, over the course of the last couple months. It's acting to me better than Nvidia has been, but I'll show you the Nvidia chart next. But made a nice move higher and got where really extended into its earnings. Like the RSI was like an 83. So it didn't really matter what they were going to report on earnings. Like most likely they weren't going to go up higher after that. Even if they reported a stellar quarter because they were just so overbought. So and I thought that they did deliver like a really good quarter, but I said, hey, let's let them come in a little bit. So I did that, and I bought the dip in this right into the top of the value area for the month, and had a nice day today, and really didn't act like the rest of the market. It continued to kind of grind higher. Right. So again, a little bit slower than, than, Oklo today, which was unbelievable. But I have to say, like, I was very happy with the way that I picked some names yesterday. So Oklo had this, had this news out, pre-market that, they're going to be working with, the government, I believe, up in, um, up in Alaska. So I mean, I have to say, like, this is a really nice move. It looks like a beautiful cup and handle of 29%. Now they are coming down because they did a secondary after hours. They're down about 5 or 6%. I think it was a $400 million secondary. But I'll tell you, like, maybe this is a dip that you want, but I mean, this looks to me like pretty textbook cup and handle. I did not have, I was looking at both Oklo. It was funny because I was looking at both Oklo and SMR, when I put together our weekend watch list, and I put SMR on the list. I liked it. I thought it was showing a little bit better strength. And this is also a really beautiful breakout. It's not as perfect textbook, as the Oklo, cup and handle, but I mean, this is really nice. I bought this today. I had to chase it a little bit. But what I did was I took a target in it. So to kind of help me manage the position, and I will be adding, on the dip. And again, it was a little bit too erratic yesterday. I had it on, obviously, like, on my watch list, but so I hate to do that. I hate to chase into that kind of strength. But as we know, these names can move 10, 20, 30%. It's like no problem for these things. There's short interest in them, and they can really move. So that was a big deal today. Some people, I guess, who continue to kind of trade these couple names today. Very, very impressive. Just to kind of switch gears here for a second, I just wanted to talk about the move in crude today. Right, so it's crude doing something different. I've talked about, towards the end of last week, I talked about the move in silver. I talked about the move in platinum, palladium. Well, crude joined the party here, and this is a big move. This is a 5% move in crude. We haven't really seen a big up moves in crude recently. It's a very sideways looking chart. Is it getting out of this downtrend? I wouldn't get too worried about crude yet because that could dampen things. Like I saw a lot of puts going up today in the airlines today, which the airlines underperformed, and I would think that's because crude. Logically, I would think that's because crude went up 5% today. But you've got some major resistance. You've got both the 200-day moving average to get through, and 68.84 is the bottom of this year's value area. So I'll bring this so you can see this also on the weekly chart. So it's retesting the breakdown. So again, I I would watch to see what happens here. 68.84. I didn't go into buying any energy today or any of that. I know that the power generation companies, I would rather be in these things. I think, I did take a look. I talked about a couple of these names yesterday. I would maybe look if we get a continuation. I know this is EQT is more of like a nat gas name, but I do like the dip here and EQT. Also, EXE has been also another outperformer. That would be a name that I would consider as well. So let's talk a little bit more about some growth names, right? And I think Palantir did a good job today. It didn't close on the absolute highs today, but it did make a new closing high today. So this is bullish, right? And again, like I've had some issues like personally trading this company because I know how expensive it is. It's 90, the price to sales ratio is like 90 times. I do have this in one of my portfolios, but hey, we talked about like yesterday how there was a bit of like rotation out of the out of the leaders and into some of the underperformers. And I talked about how maybe that was pre-positioning for, maybe one of the S&P or just the index rebalancing. But I also said that could just be a one-off. And it kind of felt like that because some of the areas that did really well yesterday, the home builders, the healthcare names, they went back to underperforming again. So I think it was mainly like and that's what's nice about this market. You kind of want these buying opportunities to get into some of these names, but Palantir didn't sell off yesterday. So new highs for this again didn't close on the absolute high, but that's a really nice. I mean, it's really nice to kind of see this name just back and fill a little bit, give some trading opportunities, rolling up, and I think it looks pretty good. Hood, another name that I know everybody's watching, has recovered that dip. Again, look at how quickly that dip got bought in Robinhood, didn't stay down for long, and that's just evidence of a strong company, right? When the dips are shallow, that means that there's a lot of interest whenever the stock sells off. There's continued interest in the name. So I thought that this was pretty good as well today. Couple other, so I mentioned I was going to bring up, sometimes I say I'm going to bring up something and then I forget to do it. But NVIDIA just continues to be stuck. Notice how the top of the value area for the year and the top of the value area for the month line up. That's why you can't see these, even if you're zoomed in here, you can't see these levels. They're kind of jumbled in. But this 144 level is really difficult. And again, that's the top of the value area for the year. So that's a logical place for digestion. And we don't know, you got a decision here coming up. Either this is going to break higher or it's going to get rejected and start to pull back down. Right. A couple of the smaller names. This was on our watch list to start the week, but I like this CRDO, right? Breakout on earnings and then checking back just about to clear that 5-period moving average. Also, the level that I had my alert set to today was 70.95. So it did make it into the value area for the week. And I think this is a good watch for tomorrow. And again, it did well, up 4.5%. Meanwhile, the Qs just, continue to kind of give up gains for the as the session wore on. So that's pretty strong. Another name that I'm watching is ALAB, right? But it could not get through the top of the value area. So again, it was all over this. I mean, this name still did very well today, up 3.4% for the day, but it couldn't get through that short-term resistance. So if you're watching this name, or if this name is interesting to you, watch 95.72. And I did start a position in this. I thought it could break the value area. My eyes got big around that top of the value area for the week, and it couldn't do it. Now, and this could just mean that you need to be a bit more patient. Like, of course, we want things to work right away and break through some resistance, but probably have to be a little bit more patient here. But I would watch to see this lower range and make sure the price holds that. Couple other names that came from our weekend watch lists that I thought was particularly strong today was Shopify. Getting closer to that VPOC, so nice little break out of the range. Again, similar to a few names today, but did not close on the highs. Watch that VPOC up there, 119.11. Still, even though didn't close on the highs, still up 3.5% for the day. So not bad and not bad looking. Couple other names too. I mentioned the power generation names. Look at the move in GEV. Right. And I think also what's interesting, we know that we've got, various different names in this power generation group. You've got NRG. NRG did not act as well. So that's still dipping. I'm actually looking for a move down to 144.40, right? That down to that support. And I may be looking to get involved there. But we're not there yet. And we did not hold the 20-day moving average or the 5-day moving average. So that's okay. Let this come down maybe a little bit more. AGX is another name that I find interesting. Look at the move today in AGX. So also see the theme here, down to the 20-day moving average, find some buyers and moving back up. And note, it did get very, very extended. Again, some of these things you got to have to laugh at. 87 RSI, the AGX got to. So, it was due for some type of cooling, and you have to be kind of mindful of that. Just to kind of go through the rest of this group, VST, I think you could still keep that on your radar, but it's not acting as well as GEV. And I think that's the same thing with CEG as well. CEG had that big topping looking candle. Since then has not acted right. So I would stick with GEV in the space. Also, aerospace and defense, right? I talked about, again, I like to kind of revisit some of the things that I talked about in yesterday's video. Notice how this was going lower this morning. This is around the open. Look at it come back, right? So again, buyers want to be in aerospace and defense. I'm still in some RTX, which again is a lower volatility name in this group, but look at it close at new highs. Again, probably not everybody's watching this name because they're watching Oklo, but doesn't matter to me. New closing high for Raytheon, and that's a nice move. Some of the other names, the drone names, and not just drone names, but the what do you call these names? Like the not self-driving, but regardless, ACHR, right? Vertical takeoff, air transport names. Very nice. Did not break through its value area, so I would watch 1225. Took out this VPOC, remember? Popped last, like I guess that was towards the end of last week. Joby, of course, is another name in the space. Also, not the great. These names they are a little bit tough because sometimes they do this. They try to go higher and they don't make it. AVAV is another name that I actually added into my long-term portfolio last week. It did take out that VPOC and got rejected. But I still like what's going on here and like the name, even though this is not perfect. Just a couple other names that I wanted to mention too. Another name, which I think also, take a look, comes into the 20-day moving average, top of the value area. Again, you see the theme of what's going on here. A lot of these names that dipped, it's very, very similar setup. Come back to the 20-day moving average, come back to the top of the value area for the month, and you're finding buyers, right? You're finding some interest. Now, again, I'm not trying to predict here, but at least you have if you went long this name or any of the other names that I mentioned around the 20-day moving average, like where to get out of these positions, right? You know that if it doesn't hold and starts to break back below the 20-day moving average or into the value area for the month, right? Then you know it's losing more momentum and it's losing the conviction, right? These things should be very, very simple. Right. Another name that I'm watching that actually did break its 20-day moving average, but I like the fact that it's almost filled it's almost come all the way back here, is Melly. So I like the dip here. It may have to come into the 50-day moving average, and that would be interesting if it comes all the way back and fills the earnings gap. But I like the sell-off here. Again, looking at names dipping, sell-offs and uptrends, right, and coming into support. I think that's very important. All right, guys, that's it. I feel like I could cover another 10 or 15 names, but the video just would be a little bit too long. So thanks for tuning in. And when you get a chance, if you like these live streaming recaps, just retweet them or send me a note, like the tweet at least, and that will compel me to keep doing these because I'm just kind of trying this out for the week. All right, guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.